Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wrestling Prep Podcast. We're here with Coach Carol and Wester. I know it's been a while. I think you've made trips to Ireland, Great Britain, out to Thailand, Florida, just recently Vegas. So tell us where you've been, what you've been up to, and then we'll see what you were thinking about talking about today.
Yeah, so it's been an exciting time. The whole spring has been completely packed with trips all over the world. I was really fortunate. Phil Tam, who's a longtime wrestling prep summer camp attendee from Scotland, got Stevie Ray, former UFC fighter, to ask me to come to
Okay.
Scotland,
Yeah.
and it was freaking awesome. It was beautiful. The people were great. We were down right down the street from where they filmed the opening episode of Outlander.
Oh,
You
all
know,
right.
if you're a Sam Hunan fan, I mean, it was pretty exciting. But the people were incredible, and the energy of the MMA community and the interest in what was being brought to them and the gratefulness to have an opportunity to learn something and implement it. It was fabulous. And then right before I got to Scotland, I went to Ryan Roddy's Yoda MMA
Right.
outside of Belfast. And
Hmm.
Ryan is a former Bellator fighter and also a long time prior to him being a little cuckoo, Conor McGregor workout partner,
Okay.
partner
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all his fights. And
Right.
but that was an incredible experience too. The people of Ireland, the sincerity. There are people who drove from all over Ireland for the event while we were there, and then when a group of Wrestling Academy in Birmingham, England, heard we were coming to Ireland and Scotland, they
Mhm.
invited me to come to Great Britain. So Phil jumped a plane with me,
All
and
right.
we went over, and we had a really we had a really good experience while we were there too.
That's
And
awesome.
then I came back and immediately, pretty quickly went to Thailand, went
Hmm.
to Koh Phangan, Thailand,
Right.
and then to Phuket, which was
Yep.
this great experience. Haney came over from Bali,
Yep.
and Javier Mendez was there from Dubai.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I got to see Mike Swick at AKA Thailand, which is this incredible, like movie set quality resort where people come to train to like vacation and train. And
Okay.
then at Peach Eye had me come to a clinic there. And I didn't realize that Phuket's one of their big tourist attractions was MMA. There's one strip that has over 50 MMA places in like less than a mile.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
there's buses and they just pull up.
Huh.
They pull up and people get out with the camera like you're going to Stonehenge or something and come and they're like staring there, while you're coaching. And it's
Okay.
crazy and everybody's used to it. And it's almost like being in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam with all the bikes on the sidewalk. There's just bike, moped, scooter everywhere. And Phuket was fantastic. And then we went out to Bangtao and Anwar Gilbert, who was their head movement coach there. And then it was like a who of people that I've worked with.
Okay.
Rusty Steve was there, Mo Alad was there, Moha was there from Daniel Cormier's Fight Academy. Oh, I turn around, there's Juan Archuleta. Like the people are just talking to me, and Frank Hickman, of course, who I've known a long time. And it was the Bangtao campus. You walk by, and there's maybe 150 people taking a Muay Thai class
Okay.
who are just hobbyists.
Right, right.
And then there's just like this massive place for pro fighters. And then it's just crazy. And
Huh.
then buses are coming up and people are taking pictures. They're asking for your picture
Huh.
and they're coming up and grabbing you. And then there was a big Russian contingency there who associated me with Habib and those
Hmm.
guys.
Right.
So they were super excited. They had a picture of me with Habib in the corner, and they're like, "This is you," and I'm like, "Yes." And it was a good experience. And I think that Bangtao was asking me to come back for several weeks to do a seminar,
Oh, that's great.
a larger seminar there. And then
Hmm.
I came back and I got to go to uh, saw Ong Los Nongs play Python MMA
Hmm.
in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's the former one championship light heavyweight or maybe heavyweight champ from Burma. and he's
Okay.
got this place, this new gym, and it was great. And I got to see Andre Fiallo while I was there. And
Okay.
then I just went to Vegas.
Right. Yeah, you spent the weekend in Vegas there.
It was great. I got to meet Pat Milicic and CatchCon. I was at the PI,
Hmm.
and it was cool because Daniel was one of the captains for the Ultimate Fighter. So there's tons of people that I know there, plus people I already knew. It was a really good experience. I loved the CatchCon event. It was not what I imagined it was going to be. It was enormous, not so much in size, but in impact. And
Okay.
I really hope they ask me to come back again.
Yeah, I
And
saw the roster of some of the coaches and folks that were going to be there. It looked like a really highly decorated group and the people that probably knew a lot of interesting things that they brought together to coach there, which was interesting.
well, that was what was just so amazing to me. Well, one, JJ Howland,
Hmm.
he was the clinic before mine. And of course I did the clinic for the Anasietis, Naps
Yep.
and Alex while I was there, and then Jocelyn Cavaletti came over, and I mean it was just, so nurturing. Um, I did forget to say in Thailand, the best part was that Javier Mendez was there from Dubai.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. That's really cool. You guys
Yeah,
got
that
to
got to
cross
hang out
paths
there.
in a foreign land there.
Well, it was incredible. I loved every second of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, back to Vegas, that was a super experience. And then this week I have a lot of athletes in working privately, including some of the U17 world team members
Okay.
coming up. And then I head to Billings, Montana on Thursday.
Yeah, you'll be all over the place. It's like Montana, Kentucky, Colorado. You're out here to Arizona, so the next, other than up to Minnesota, so big. You'll
Yeah,
be
from
all over the
Minnesota to
country
Iowa.
over the next month or so. Yeah, Iowa after that, then Montana. So yeah, all over the country over the next month or so.
Yes. I think I'm only here to be back in Virginia maybe 6 days till
All right.
2 or 3 days before the first summer camp
Yeah,
starts,
yeah,
June
yeah.
20th.
All
So,
right. Oh, that
well,
sounds awesome.
the other big thing that's been going on and that I've had is noticing is the number of athletes that I'm working with who are garnering success,
Hmm.
um, like having a major event win that they've really been concentrating on, and realizing that we need to make more of an effort to connect neurologically with athletes, their success to their personal happiness, to using that personal happiness to overcome things they don't like to do or negative or things they have negative connotation about. So let's just take, well, I don't want to mention any names because it's not in particular, but some of the U17, U15 athletes have huge success
Hmm.
and they're out at the US Open, and immediately, people, Jordan Burroughs, who everybody's there is coming up,
Yeah.
tapping them and saying, hey, I'm so proud of you. You did so great and you're a stud. And they develop feelings about those things. And oftentimes when someone feels fear, it is associated with what other people think of them. And it's real
Hmm.
easy as a parent or a coach to say, hey, did you hear what JB said about you? Hey, did you hear what Cormier said about you? Hey, did you hear what Ruben Valencia said about you? And really, it's all great, but we need to help these athletes and parents develop happiness within themselves for what they've accomplished and not looking to external. Because when you start to look to external, then you start fearing what are people going to think of you. And um, I was suggesting to a particular athlete, they make a list of everything during this time frame that they were training for this big event where they felt hesitation or fear. And could they now look at those things and go, oh, I really had nothing to fear. And I'm super happy with myself. And I'm going to draw this line from my personal happiness to something that I feared and use it as a way of remembering to overcome and not to procrastinate or shy away from or not be vulnerable to new information. because when you learn to be happy with yourself and how you did, that's number one, followed as a youth wrestler with your parents, then the other things are just like noise in the background.
Mhm.
It's not important. But with social media, with these wrestling user groups or user groups of parents where they feel free to garner anonymous names and go on there and blast. And adults are discussing these things with these younger wrestlers. I read, did you see? And then the younger wrestlers start to look for information they could garner off social media so they could fit in with the parent or coach and have something to add to the conversation. Yeah, well, I saw so and so said such and such. And really, none of those topics, none of those things, none of those people have anything to do with the structure that helps an athlete be successful. None of
Yeah,
those people are paying their parents' bills.
right.
None of those people are going to drive them or take them anywhere, and you just have to learn how not to let anybody else bother you and know that your happiness is what you should use to feel comfortable overcoming things.
Mhm.
So when you're happy with yourself, the other kind of, I mean, it's cool that people think when
Right.
when people say things to me that are positive, it's cool, but it doesn't define me. But I
Yeah.
find that people who say those things to me want me to react to them in such a way as if their words do define me, and
Mhm.
they're looking for recognition that they've bestowed
Yeah.
on me.
Right. Right.
And that's just part of that cycle. And I'm realizing that it's super important that we start reprogramming neurologically and trying to focus on the line between liking ourselves and overcoming.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was even thinking back to as you were talking about the evolution of sort of training in our sport, where at first it was all about the physical preparation, right? And your emotions or your thoughts weren't much of a consideration. And then more recently, we've thought about some of the mental preparation that goes into to competing, and you're even thinking about, well, what happens after the result. And I also think we probably spend a lot of time talking with athletes and helping athletes deal with setbacks in competition and how they can use those to then move forward. But you're talking about even the opposite of that is how do you deal with success in a way that's productive, because that's something we probably don't think much about, because when you get success, that's sort of, we assume that's an awesome thing, and there is no need to deal with it, because it just is that was the goal all along. And but some of the consequences of that success you're saying is something that we need to consider, especially when depending on where the athlete's emotions are invested after that success, as far as where they're getting their validation from.
Well, there's a big difference between mindset and neurological implementation or neurological structuring your thoughts. So the wrestling mindset and some of these
Hmm.
mindset organizations have done incredible work.
Yeah.
I've had so many people tell me about the positiveness of their experience. However, a mindset doesn't always have the ability to go back and trace and rearrange thoughts so you can overcome uh, issues or things that hamper someone's success when they're successful or on their way to being successful. It's a dopamine hit.
Hmm.
I'm going to walk around all the mats one more time with my gold medal
Right.
because every time somebody tells me I've done a great job, I get a dopamine hit. It's like opening up Instagram or TikTok
Mhm.
or Snapchat and getting that dopamine hit, which is, scientifically proven.
Right.
So, and then we need to also address the parents and the coaches' roles. So I recently was watching one of the athletes that's here, who's a U17 member, their interview after their win at the US Open.
Hmm.
And I can see a lot of times these athletes are having to, they're checking off. Did I say, did I thank all the right people? Did I say, I want to do well on and off the mat? Did I follow all the rhetoric? Because they have people around them. They've either seen it by example, or they have people around them saying, I want my recognition. And
Yeah.
I want you to say that. And those people are not asking that because they're horrible people, because
Right.
they're looking for the
Hmm.
dopamine hit, or as an
Right.
adult, they haven't, fully done the very difficult and never ending task of dealing with your own trauma and your own situation. So years and years ago, a very wise parent, who I'm not going to name, but they refused to allow Flow Wrestling or anybody to interview their boys. And because their oldest boy had been interviewed a lot, and he sort of felt like the interviewing, or what it manifested was the interviewing helped him build a structure in his brain, like where he believed all these people wanted to know what he thought because he was so great and he knew what he was doing. And maybe he did not need the guidance of school teachers, parents, and coaches,
Okay.
and got himself in a little bit of trouble because there's a lot of pandering in those interviewing processes. There's
Right.
a lot of pandering when you see, your Dirty Flow Wrestling move of the week, or your highlight, your head pitch is highlighted, or etc. And this family learned and did not let the other two boys be interviewed, or not without them being there, and I think that was extremely smart,
Hmm.
because the purpose of the interviewing, at the end of the day, I think the person who's interviewing them is genuinely interested in this information, but they've been told that the purpose of the business is to get clicks
Yep.
on all of the flow sports,
Hmm.
not judging anyone, that's
Right.
legitimate business.
Right.
And so there's a usury involved there that affects the neuro success of a person or an athlete. And I think that that's something that really needs to be paid
Hmm.
attention to. One whole set is, you're, as a coach and a parent, you're raising this person to learn to love themselves and be proud of themselves.
Hmm.
And that pride should be the motivating factor to do things well, to do schoolwork well, to treat their siblings well, to do what they need to do in their sport, to be successful or where they want to be, not dependent on the dopamine hit of approval of people who are never going to pay their bills, never going to help house their parents when they're older, never going to take their son that's struggling with mental health issues to the psychiatrist. They're not a part of what's going to make this person's life better. And that you have to teach people to draw the line from A to B and circumvent all the other things that try to make people do that. And I even see it, it's so interesting to me. You and I know that Wrestling Prep's Instagram and social media is has a lot of activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
We probably get 20 emails a day of people wanting to monetize, and had a major travel company reach out and ask if they could monetize me or us through them. And now, I just don't really want to do that.
Hmm.
But you also see people who are spending all this time on social media, just commenting or tormenting or sharing, and they I don't know what they're trying to do or elicit from other people, or how badly they hurt to want to hurt someone else. I mean, who wakes up in the morning and goes, how do I hurt this other person? And for me, I think that has a lot to do with dopamine
Yeah, yeah,
addiction and not a clear picture or a clear dissection and not a clear pathway to teach athletes, coaches, parents, not to be involved with that. And when
right.
people say, go ahead.
No, I was thinking that this process has to be really difficult, especially if an athlete's trying to go it alone. They're an adolescent or a kid, their entire existence at that age is about group. I mean, we're a social species, and that's the time in your life when you're sort of establishing yourself as a member of the group, and getting praise from others is at that age more important than a lot of things that we as adults probably kids do what we as adults think as silly things or crazy things or reckless things for the approval of others, just because that's how you're wired at that age, is to try to fit in. And as a our species has been doing that since since our species has been around. You had to be an accepted member of the group to survive, and so having an athlete try to navigate those things themselves, as you're saying, kind of seems like a recipe for disaster, because at that point in your life, that is, in many cases, the most important thing. We see that with the decisions the kids make at school, and all kinds of things. Is their friends at that age are much more important than many of the adults in their lives, um, but it's important, as you said, as kids and athletes get praise for their accomplishments, for adults around them to be aware of the fact that of what's important and what's not important, and try to get them to focus on those things that are going to be healthy for them mentally to go after, rather than just looking for acceptance or approval, or especially from people that they don't know, or as you said, people that will have no impact on their lives, even though it might be nice to hear those things from strangers. But th those people aren't the ones that are going to be with them when things are not going well.
Correct. It was interesting to have, I think there's 8, 10 athletes here right now, and they're all 17, 18 and under. And not all of them come from the, same organizations or groups, so they're connecting for the first time.
Hmm.
And the way they're connecting, if I'm not directing the conversation with the ones that are in the same vehicle with me or in practice, is they get on the social media and they say, "Did you see what so and so said about so and so?" And then they get on there and they're like talking. And one said to the other, "Look what this person sent me. I don't know what they're trying to say to me. It I don't know what this means." And I said, maybe they're just trying to connect. Maybe those things are of value to them. Maybe you could just say, "Hey, what does this mean to you?" And ask. They're just reaching out, they're being vulnerable. So even if it doesn't, not a clear picture to you of what it is, don't diminish by what is that, questioning it. Don't diminish their attempt to reach out because you're trying to avoid looking like something yourself. Just ask them, try to connect. And getting athletes, young athletes, to connect over things that actually matter, as opposed to what's easily available for them to do, is hard. I mean, these kids are in cars or vans or school buses, traveling, airplanes. They're not easily to be entertained. They've got everything shoved in, all their food, their BCAAs. To bring a book and find a friend and then throw the book at them and say, "Let's both read these books together and talk about them while we're on the U16 dual team," really doesn't happen. I think the last time I had that experience was when Jason Welch was in college. Bill Mitchell tells the story how in the first building where, I met you, Bryce,
Yeah.
San Jose, he said that Jason walked in where all the coaches' mattresses and stuff were and said, "Where's Carolyn's?" And they said, "Here." And he said he put a book down on my pillowcase, and then he went and got a mattress and put it about like 10 feet from me, away from me, and put his head at the other side, and he had his book. And somebody said to him, "Why do you give Carolyn the book?" He said, "Oh, we read this, we often read the same books,
Yeah.
and we talk about the books." And I just remember that recently. We used to have I do that more now with theater, with movie,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
scary movies or whatever, but movies that happen, have intense stories, so they're here that
Right.
we all talk about them.
Right.
But to teach them to talk and to develop this neural pathway, but also I think to we all spend so much time with ourselves, questioning ourselves, and you can't get on social media or Flow Wrestling or Facebook and not read criticism or questioning or about our sport, about others in our sport, about how people feel about you. And that just causes, everybody's brains to whir. And every time they read something negative, they're still getting a dopamine hit. So now dopamine is the pleasure is being associated with the negative. So now you're making it even worse.
Hmm.
So to have an intent to help your athlete, or whether they're your child or your coaching or your other coaches or your peers, to have a method where they can have they start to teach themselves a literal reaction to negative overthinking. And they go, "I was very happy with myself when I won the US Open. So happy that I did all these things that I didn't really want to do, and I questioned and doubted, and I wasted a lot of time questioning and doubting. I think I'm just going to assume when I'm asked to do something that I'm going to love myself for doing it, and I'm not going to overthink." Of course, it doesn't work instantly, but
Yeah.
then that process needs to be started. And that's where we're missing out. And I can feel myself in a lot of events, and many people, even at CatchCon, the professional older athletes said to me, "I so appreciate you dealing with talking about childhood trauma or things you haven't dealt with. And when you don't want to hear something new, what is that? Why do you feel that way? Who cannot not hear something and discard it if they don't want to do it? Why is it making you angry?" Because that has very little. You signed up to come to this event. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You knew who the coaches were. Like nothing's,
Right.
like nothing's a mystery, but
Yeah.
you're still having these feelings.
Right.
So this really spectacular thing happened years and years ago. Stephanie Herman, who was a professional ballet dancer, was my Pilates instructor way before I ever saw wrestling. And she talked about this physical therapist, massage therapist, who said, "I'm going to stretch your body a certain way. And when I do it, it's going to pull the fascia in your chest. And tears may just start running out of your eyes, even though you're feeling no pain."
Mm.
And that is a trauma release. And I forgot about it. And then I did Bikram yoga, and they said I was in this position and my stomach felt nauseous, and I tears, and the instructor said, "Oh, that's a fascia
Mhm.
response." And so we had an athlete with this group this week, and one of the U17 athletes, he took his body backward correctly, not hands over the head, but
Mhm.
that pull, and this just teared up.
Mm.
And the other one said, "You're tearing up." I said, "Oh, that's so great. You're releasing." And he said, I said, "You're releasing trauma or something." And he's like, "I've had no trauma." And I said their name, and I said, "I've spoken to your parents. I know about the things that have happened. You have experienced trauma." And then today, one of the athletes on the world team, I adjusted, we were practicing, throwing and doing some things. And I adjusted their position of taking their body backwards, that forced the very long torso athlete, forced a really steep, decline from his belly button down, which of course would make a great touch pin. But he got up and he goes, "Oh, I released some trauma."
Huh.
And he was so proud.
Yeah, that's cool.
So proud. So I think all this, what some people have replaced, I'm older, so my generation, that would have been called, you know, all that touchy-feely
Mhm.
California hippie, weed smoking, response is actually turned to something. And I've spent way more time on this. You know how throughout the year I do some private coaching
Mhm.
when I'm in Virginia, but I don't run club practices or anything
Right.
anymore. So I just travel so much. So when these athletes come, they're spending a lot of time and effort to be here while I'm here, and I'm spending more time discussing and helping them draw these things out, like literally on paper.
Yeah.
How do you feel this normally? What do you think next? What do you think next? So how would you be if you felt this? And over here, there's three types of happiness when you do well. Others, your parents or family, you. Draw the line and get rid of all these other steps you put in place to try to protect yourself from something that really doesn't matter. I'm not educated in this. I'm not a
Yeah.
specialist. Tenny, I'm dependent on Tenny McCarty and Ashley Judd and Melissa Ritchie, for insight and through their works and things on what to do and what to think. But I can see that this is where we're losing athletes that have so much potential. They start having potential, they have some success, they get the dopamine hit of these pats from people who are genuine, who are sincere, but they're not part of their lives. They're not going
Yeah.
to be there forever. And they let go of trying to create happiness for themselves and liking themselves and having a self pride. And we're losing those athletes to all kinds of things: alcohol, drugs, doing things they're not supposed to do, not wanting to train, overthinking, suicide attempts. And all this stuff comes from that, not not having that clear neural pathway
Right.
from liking yourself to liking yourself enough to use that to overcome things that are painful or triggers, or working with a therapist or whatever the option is. Finding an option.
It seems like that's more difficult now than maybe it has been ever, just because to be intentional about where your thoughts are going and how you're processing things, because it's just so easy to open up your phone and start scrolling. And so we allow these devices to just sort of hijack our thoughts and don't really process things because everything's so ephemeral that it's there 1 second and then it's off the screen the next, and we just keep filling ourselves with the thoughts and opinions of others, and don't have this framework that you're talking about, as far as let's just sit with ourselves and think about all of the things that I'm encountering, rather than just continuing to fill the time and our heads with all of these outside things that are just so easy, rather than, yeah, sit down and think about how you're processing these things for a bit, and the effect that they're having on you, rather than just continuing to scroll, which is like I said, so easy. We've all, I think, sat with our phone out and looked up at the clock, and it's been a half an hour and we haven't really done anything but just look at 200 images and read comments, and it doesn't, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there are certainly positive aspects of
For
social
sure.
media and the interactions that people get to have there. But when you spend too much time just allowing, yeah, others to sort of hijack your thoughts and what's being fed to you, rather than being intentional on what are you seeking out and how are you processing these things, that seems like an important step that's much easier to miss now than I mean, I'm thinking about when I was a kid. You had a lot of time to yourself, and kids aren't allowed to be bored anymore because it takes 3 seconds. And I do the same thing. I'm standing in line at the store, and I'll pull out my phone and start scrolling. And there's people all around me, but it's like I can't be bored for more than 5 seconds because I have to
Right.
keep filling my head with things. And yeah, if all we're
Or
seeking
talk to
is
another
that,
human.
yeah, or that dopamine hit, that we were we missed for 5 seconds without really thinking about these things. It's easy to just be on the surface and allow things to creep in and give us satisfaction that are things that shouldn't be and take that prime position as far as where we get our happiness.
Well, and I think I'm going to make a jump, same topic, but different application. I think there's a lot of parents and coaches who are genuinely want their kids to do well, and they get on these user groups, or they hear a blurb, somebody says a blurb, I'm up at 4:59 every morning, or I do this or I do that, and I lift weights, and then I do this and then I do that, and that people get this list of things in their head, and they're not, that they're making their athletes do, and they're not checking to see if those actions or tasks or sets of coaching is expressing, showing up in their success and happiness. Right? I don't believe that everyone needs to do, get up in the morning from the second they wake up to the second they go to bed, train wrestling. Right? I don't believe that.
Hmm.
I and I think that you have to look at all of those activities and determine priority. One, for so parents don't spend too much of their ancillary money. Two, so they don't wear themselves and their kids out. Three, parents don't neglect their own health to sacrifice for their kids. Right? I mean, all of those things, and try to determine which is effective, and recognize if you're finding yourself in a user group, or surrounded by people that you've let influence you, or a club or an organization where they are telling you that you have to do everything they say and want, and you're not allowed any independent thought without a severe reaction that ends up hurting your child, that you can't be a part of their group, that you need to find a different coach. I mean, well, let's just go back to Jason Welch, right? Jason Welch was successful because of John Welch. Number one, John Welch, was he the best technical coach available? No. Uh, did he love wrestling? Yes. He would help anybody who showed up, never going to come to practice again. But
Hmm.
came that day, John Welch helps them. But what John did do was remain the coordinator and the sorter of the coaches he let around Jason, and he set the stage for what was going to happen when Jason was training. For example, he on occasion would ask me to take Jason to somewhere to practice, and he'd say, have Jason get in this on bottom, have him get in this situation, and have him get out and ask that coach to help you with that part. If they start trying to change his shots or anything else, tell them no, thank you.
Hmm.
And I think it's okay for parents to be in there and do that. And I think coaches have to learn that everybody's career, everybody's life is a stack of people in it. And where you are in the stack and for how long doesn't necessarily depict your amount of influence or how much you've done to them, but you're never going to know how much your input is or isn't. So you have to do it freely and willingly. And if you're not doing it freely from your heart and you're not really willing to do it, then there's some things you don't need to do. Carolyn Wester, should not be coaching uh, club practices. I have no patience for the parents. I
Yeah.
I don't want to be interrupted. I know that I can go to the UFC PI or just the UFC corporate headquarters and walk into the restaurant facility and I'm going to get asked by 4 or 5 people if I can help work with them. I'm not willing to do those things, and I can't be a club coach. I can't run club practices and set my life around waiting on parents who may or may not show up or may not pay. I can't do that freely and willingly. So I shouldn't do that. There's a place for me in athletes, and I don't have to be in every athlete's life or every coach's life. But I have learning and have learned that I need to pick where I can do it freely and willingly from my heart, freely from my heart. And I'm willing to do every extra effort. Like, don't walk out the door and go, I should bring blue tape and a tape measure, to this practice and go, oh, I'll do it next time. That is self-sabotage and a sure sign that I'm not doing it willingly.
Yeah.
And I need to either address it with myself and change, or I need to remove myself so I don't accidentally damage or hurt somebody else in the process.
It seems like it goes back to being intentional, right? As a coach, as an athlete, as a parent, this is the role I can play, and this is the role I want to play, and I'm going to decide what I can do to be of most help in this situation, and then put your whole heart into that thing and not be distracted by all of the other things you could be doing. What's the old quote is just sometimes we mistake activity for achievement, or it seems like those parent groups that you were talking about, and coaches can do the same thing as we get into this situation where everyone's just trying to one up each other as far as all of the things that they do as an athlete or as a coach or as a parent, for the athlete, and what this my kid does these 5 things every single day, and well, my kid does 7 things every single day, so that makes them they're going to be more successful. Whereas if you step back and are really intentional with, why are we doing these things, and are we doing these things with maximum effort and with our whole heart, or are we just checking things off a list that someone else prepared for us as being important for our success?
But in so there's like this crazy thing, right? I'm not an expert on the monetization of social media. But there are a lot of parents who try to subsidize, who are working hard to subsidize the funding of their kids' coaching and traveling and training by creating a successful with a lot of followers, I guess Instagram or TikTok, etc. I don't really understand it. We have somebody else who does it because we know that I don't really understand it. And don't want to, really.
Yeah.
But I do see sometimes parents who I don't think are actively trying to make money for their athlete, but it's just this whole long diatribe about my kid gets up, early and does things when no one else is willing to do, and
Hmm.
they deserve this win, and gosh, if only every win could be because someone deserved it.
Right.
They work the hardest, but that isn't how that goes. But just this whole need to document everything.
Yeah. When you've talked before about it makes you cringe a little bit when you see parents or coaches on the opposite end of that, where an athlete may not quite experience all of the success that they wished, and the first comment usually from those around them, and probably they mean well, is to say, well, this isn't the result we wanted, and then they praise the kid for their effort,
Back to the
yeah,
drawing board. We're
but
back
we
in
don't. Right.
the
Yeah, we're gonna go back to practice the next day after, losing in the finals of a big tournament, because instead of recognizing the accomplishment of
well, and
the
even
preparation for that event, and then also their performance at the event itself, and
or just the truth. They haven't won
yeah,
their last match and they haven't lost their last match.
right,
So how do you make a loss because time ran out? Maybe if it had been 20 more
mhm,
seconds, or how do you make the loss an actual win? By learning from it,
yeah,
by later at a later time when all emotions are put to rest and there's only clear-headedness, hopefully, they're writing out and discussing and yeah, I always feared this was going to happen. You've been fearing that? Yeah, for a long time. When did
Right.
that start? Oh, when I had practice, I was told to do 20, swoop singles and I couldn't finish it the way the coach wanted. They kept telling me I'm going to fail this way. I mean, what a win if you could pull that. If everybody's life is a brick wall and each brick represents something with emotion that stays with you as your wall gets taller and taller, and it's poisoning, it's weakening the wall. So if you could find it, pull that out, deal with it, and put it back, doesn't mean it's all better, but it's going to be a lot better, and you might actually be able to set up within yourself a system where when you feel this, then your immediate reaction is, that's not something that's going to help me. What's my workaround here? How am I going to minimize this reaction? How do I neutralize this?
Yeah.
And that's really what is going to make a difference, for people. Sometimes it's like a huge major thing. I've heard several of the United States women's Olympic athletes who've medaled share how in their brick of their wall of their career, there have been one or two situations or coaches or things that have been in this space and it's actually trickled everywhere. And once they got that brick adjusted, put in a clean brick, then the rest of it went away. It's almost like when your child says, "Oh, I've got so much acne," and you see 3 Hershey chocolate bar wrappers under their bed and 2 empty Coke cans, and you get them off of that, and they're like, "Whoa, my skin cleared up." It's almost the same thing, it reaches out, and if we can work with people
Mhm.
and athletes when they win and when they lose to really analyze why did you do that shot? Well, that's not, but there's a path to there,
Mhm.
and being willing to walk backwards through the path and taking the time to do it when you're driving in the car instead of you listening to music or talking on the phone, asking your child to walk you through it.
Yeah, we spend so much time making small adjustments to physical tasks and position and things like that, but oftentimes we don't take the time to think about, as you said, sort of the thought process behind each of those things and the decision making process, the tactical things that are happening during a match and when things are I mean, what's happening in their head. You can see all of the physical things. Maybe that's the easier part, right? Is to fix physical position and movement and things like that. But then to peel back one more layer and say, well, what was happening in your head when you were making the decisions to do these sorts of things? And then that becomes even more powerful when you can put those two things together.
Yeah, I find myself, I'm jumping a little bit, I find myself asking, what has happened to this person to make them want to invest the most valuable resource they have, their time,
Mhm.
and then their brain in writing and reading hurtful, horrible things about other people? And why do people give them credibility? What is that? How horrible is that? And I want to say to some of the times, just these young athletes were here and they were saying, I said, they said, one of them said, so I said, "Oh, can we talk about I'm on my computer, they're sitting behind me. I'm like, what do you, where did that come from? Well, I said, does that seem hurtful or hateful to you? Yes. I said, if you had a child, would you want them to know you had said that about somebody? No.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't. And it's just that's just such a bigger epidemic that we can't adjust. But I do think if we put, last year in summer camp, we invested in Teddy McCarty and Melissa Ritchie being there. And a lot of people actually have worked with both Teddy and Melissa, from that, individually. And I think if we continue as coaches to try to teach this neurological processing, the better off we're going to be. I mean, I think we've seen it come through Penn State, where I think Kale was the first one that was publicized, where he was spending so much time talking about teaching his athletes at Penn State how to be grateful.
Yeah, they talk about gratitude all the time. That's their
Right.
in interviews and everything. Yeah.
So once you get into the gratitude, then the gratitude is revealing. Why? Because what happens, the question becomes, why don't you feel gratitude?
Right.
Well, I deserve that, or this, or so and so didn't think I did it well. And that, that's just coming back to the brick, the damaged brick in that person, and then in dealing with that. So I don't know. I just really wanted to talk about it today.
No, this is the start of I mean, these are the sorts of things you could talk about for a long time, and situations that as coaches and athletes we're really have to put our mind to thinking about these things, because it's the less obvious of the things that we usually try to work on in our athletes and in ourselves.
And this goes back to some of the creative morphing, developing of wrestling prep that you and I and Drew Morgan have been doing, and then with Haney now, and there's even something else that's happening that I haven't even got to tell you about. It's with Netflix, and so
Okay.
I think in all of this, I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to do a once a month, or once every 2 month open call to answer and ask and direct. I know the new framework for sharing and certifying and teaching people what we've put together all these years is happening, before the close of 2026. But I think in also a separate entity might be, starting to, you and me and whomever, Drew, starting to do calls and try to help people, if they're interested.
Yeah, because these things take conversation. It's not a checklist, right? It takes conversation, and it takes thinking about yourself and your motivations and the motivations of others. It's definitely a conversation, and not something you can just give someone a checklist or a worksheet to fill out on their own. These are things you interact with others and really discover things about yourself and them, and yeah.
It's really important. As Melissa Ritchie says, it's part of the human journey. We're human.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite movies, The Contender, where Jeff Bridges says, "Sorry, there's no shortcut to greatness."
Right.
So.
All right. Well, anything else you wanted to talk about today? I know we went.
No, I just think, we're excited for summer camp.
Yeah, definitely.
And then some of the stuff that's coming up in the fall. And I really want to encourage people who might want to train with us, with me, to look at the dates under private training.
Yeah, a lot of private training dates this summer. Yeah.
Well, because they're filling.
Yeah, we've had me mark those as full last. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't even, I don't want to miss out on people who really want to train. But if they do that private training, it was sort of interesting. We had some people come; they were very cool, but it really was more of a. It was like, I don't know what the equivalent is, but it's sort of like where someone says, they want to do what you're doing, or they want you to teach them something, but really they just want to prove that they believe they're already doing what you're doing, but maybe better.
Right.
So I've had a couple of those types of, people, show up and then just keep questioning over and over. Oh, did you really teach them how to do that? Or did they take gymnastics? Did you really? And said, I'm going to answer this question once, and I'll dial a person, and you can get on the phone, and they'll answer that question for you. But that's it,
Right. Yeah.
So when people come to train privately, they can really get better. And I want to encourage people to come who really want to get better, that coming to wrestling prep is not, go to the summer camp if wrestling prep is on your checklist, because
Yeah.
we're going to get that met and you're going to be able to meet it at the need that works for you without
Mhm.
having to deal with full force Carolyn, seeing what you
The
can do better.
individual
Really,
attention and yeah, the
yes,
really
yes,
detailed
you can
analysis of
gain the
every
attention
little.
you want, yes.
Right. Right.
No, but I really want people to sign up for that who wants to do it,
Yeah.
because I really enjoy, willingly and freely enjoy working with people who are really, no matter where level they are, who really want to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, great conversation. I hope we get to do this again soon. But
And I'll see you soon
yeah, we'll
in
be
Arizona.
here in about a month or so for a week. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bye.
Bye.